Hey there, welcome to our exploration of cognitive biases and how they shape our decision-making. You might think you're a purely rational thinker, but the truth is, we're all influenced by mental shortcuts that can sometimes lead us astray. These shortcuts, known as cognitive biases, are like invisible forces guiding our thoughts and actions. They can be incredibly helpful, allowing us to make quick decisions in a complex world. But they can also trip us up, leading to poor choices and flawed reasoning. Today, we're going to dive into the fascinating world of cognitive biases, understand why they exist, and learn how to recognize them in our own thinking. So, what exactly are cognitive biases? Essentially, they're systematic patterns of deviation from norm or rationality in judgment. In simpler terms, they're mental shortcuts or rules of thumb that help us make sense of the world and make decisions quickly. Our brains evolved these shortcuts to help us survive in a world where quick decisions could mean the difference between life and death. Imagine our ancient ancestors encountering a rustle in the bushes. Those who quickly assumed it was a predator and ran away were more likely to survive and pass on their genes, even if most of the time it was just the wind. This better safe than sorry approach is still with us today, manifesting in various cognitive biases. While these biases served us well in a simpler world, they can sometimes lead us astray in our complex modern society. They can cause us to make irrational decisions, jump to incorrect conclusions, and stubbornly hold on to beliefs in the face of contradictory evidence. But don't worry, by understanding these biases, we can learn to recognize and mitigate their effects. Let's start with one of the most pervasive biases, confirmation bias. This is our tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. It's like wearing rose-colored glasses that only let us see what we want to see. For example, if you believe that a certain diet is the best for weight loss, you might eagerly read articles supporting your view while dismissing studies that suggest otherwise. This bias can be particularly dangerous in the age of social media, where we can easily surround ourselves with like-minded individuals and information that reinforces our existing views. Next up is the availability heuristic. This bias leads us to overestimate the likelihood of events with greater availability in memory, which can be influenced by how recent the memories are or how unusual or emotionally charged they may be. For instance, after hearing news reports about a plane crash, many people may temporarily overestimate the probability of a plane crash in general. This bias can lead to skewed risk assessment and irrational fears. It's why some people are more afraid of shark attacks than car accidents, even though the latter is far more likely. The anchoring bias is another common mental shortcut. It's our tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information offered, the anchor, when making decisions. This initial piece of information can have a disproportionate effect on the decision-making process. In negotiations, for example, the first number put on the table often becomes the anchor around which the rest of the negotiation revolves. This is why car dealerships often start with a high price. They're setting a high anchor to influence your perception of what's a fair price. Have you ever met someone who seemed so charming and attractive that you automatically assumed they must be intelligent and kind as well? That's the halo effect in action. This cognitive bias causes our overall impression of a person to influence how we feel and think about their character. Essentially, we take one positive attribute and let it color our entire perception. This bias doesn't just apply to people, it can affect how we view companies, products, and even ideas. It's why celebrity endorsements can be so effective in advertising. The bandwagon effect is a phenomenon whereby the rate of uptake of beliefs, ideas, fads, and trends increases the more that they have already been adopted by others. In other words, the bandwagon effect occurs when people start doing something primarily because other people are doing it, regardless of their own beliefs. This can lead to groupthink and can be particularly powerful in social and political movements. It's why fashion trends spread so quickly, and why it can be hard to resist joining in when everyone else seems to be doing something. Loss aversion is a cognitive bias that describes why, for individuals, the pain of losing is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. People are more willing to take risks to avoid a loss than to make a gain. This bias can lead to poor decision-making, especially in financial matters. For example, investors might hold on to a stock that's losing value because they can't bear to accept the loss, even when selling might be the wisest decision. These biases have real-world consequences that go far beyond simple decision-making errors. They can affect our personal relationships, leading us to misjudge people based on first impressions or to stick with unhealthy relationships because we fear the loss more than we value potential gain. In the financial world, cognitive biases can lead to poor investment decisions, overspending, and difficulty saving for the future. Politically, these biases can contribute to polarization, as people seek out information that confirms their existing views and dismiss contradictory evidence. So, how can we mitigate the impact of these cognitive biases? The first step is awareness. Simply knowing that these biases exist and being able to recognize them in action is a powerful tool. When making important decisions, try to slow down and consider alternative perspectives. Seek out diverse viewpoints, especially those that challenge your existing beliefs. Be willing to change your mind when presented with new evidence. Practice metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. Ask yourself why you believe what you believe. What evidence do you have? Could you be falling prey to one of these biases? When you hear a statistic or a claim, don't just accept it at face value. Consider the source and look for corroborating evidence. Another helpful strategy is to use structured decision-making processes. For important decisions, write down your options, the potential outcomes, and the probabilities of each. This can help counteract the influence of emotions and gut reactions that often drive our biased thinking. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate cognitive biases entirely, that's likely impossible. Instead, we want to recognize their influence and make more conscious, deliberate decisions when it matters most. As we wrap up, let's recap what we've learned. Cognitive biases are mental shortcuts that can both help and hinder our decision-making. We've explored several common biases, including confirmation bias, the availability heuristic, anchoring bias, the halo effect, the bandwagon effect, and loss aversion. These biases can have significant impacts on our personal lives, our financial decisions, and even our political views. But armed with this knowledge, we're better equipped to recognize these biases in action and take steps to mitigate their influence. By seeking diverse perspectives, questioning our assumptions, and being aware of our emotional responses, we can make more rational, well-informed decisions. I encourage you to continue learning about cognitive biases. There are many more than we've covered today, each offering fascinating insights into how our minds work. Pay attention to your own thought processes and see if you can spot these biases in action. Share what you've learned with friends and family. Discussing these concepts can help reinforce your understanding and spread awareness. Remember, the human mind is an incredible tool, but it's not perfect. By understanding its quirks and biases, we can learn to use it more effectively. So the next time you're faced with an important decision, take a moment to consider whether cognitive biases might be influencing your thinking. You might be surprised at what you discover. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the world of cognitive biases. I hope you found it as fascinating as I do. Until next time, keep thinking critically and questioning your assumptions. Your future self will thank you for it.